Welcome back to the Icon Show, the space where we really go behind the brand, the highlight reels, and into the seasons that really shaped us. I'm your host, Jordan Lynae, entrepreneur, speaker, mentor, and business strategist, helping leaders turn their voice into visibility, authority, and legacy. And today's conversation is one about resilience. Because what really happens when life strips the version of you that felt strong? What happens when your health shifts, your body shifts, your identity shifts, and you're forced to rebuild from the inside out? Today, we're sitting down with Louie. Louie has walked through a major stroke, heart disease, diabetes, and even has crushed his foot, and all while continuing to lead, build, and rise. This conversation isn't just about survival, it's about becoming, it's about the hard work beneath entrepreneurship that nobody talks about. And it's about remembering who you are, even in the middle of some of the hardest seasons of your life. And one thing Luby shared before this episode that deeply hit me was, we go through these seasons in life and the resilience that really shapes who we are, who we're becoming. And I would love to welcome Luby to the show today. Welcome to the Icon Show. So honored to have you here with us today, talking about all of the things.
Well, thank you.
Yes. And before we really go into business strategy, any of that, I
Mhm.
want to go back to the season that changed everything for you. And we've known each other for quite some time. We actually met each other at church and just followed your journey along the way. So I'm so honored to have you here and yeah, taking
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, that does go back quite a ways. I mean, that's what, 2015 or something like that. I mean, it's been a while. Yeah, because I entered. Yeah, it's or before 2014, probably 20. Yeah, way
yeah,
back. So it's been a long time. But yeah, if we go back to those journeys, I mean, it's something where I was a traveling photographer and speaker and toured the country doing all sorts of things, and that in a field that I had been in for 35 years, and
wow.
then got involved here, and I met my wife, and one thing led to another, and then next thing you know, I'm from Indiana to Iowa, and then find myself shifting gears into really not so much from the photography world, but into video, and then just leaving that entirely, and then going into some time in ministry, and then seminary, and going through there, and then kind of coming back to marketing and strategy and other pieces of that. So yeah, it's been really kind of a wild trip. And then 2024 changed a lot of things when I had a major stroke.
No.
So one of these little, and it started even the year before that, to 2023, with Bell's palsy, and then
Wow.
that kind of was a precursor to other things going on in me, and we didn't really realize it, but the one of the things, the lack of self-care, busy as school. And when I went through and got a master's degree, and then went on to doctoral work, and then you're constantly writing, and then that led into me going into really a theological state of interpersonal neurobiology. So you're mixing theology and neuroscience, and how that mind works with the theological backgrounds. And that was fun. For me, that was about the whole mindset shifts, and it led to a lot of different pieces of developing my world and shaping these things. But then Bell's palsy detoured things. And I was in the middle of getting my thesis accepted, or my thesis proposal accepted. And all of a sudden, my cheek starts doing this while I'm on a call, much like this call. And you could watch my eye start to close and my mouth start to deform. And of course, the professor looks at me and says, "Should we stop? I think you might be. I don't mean to be offensive, but you might be having a stroke." And I
Wow.
had to chuckle and say, "Let me turn the camera off." And I did a stroke test. Now, who knows how to do a stroke test in the middle of something like that? I turn my head, I kind of pull on my tongue, I pull on my eyes, and I do all these tests. I'm like, no, it's probably Bell's palsy. Let's continue. I got to get this done.
Um,
But that was, that's the piece where someone is I should have just said, "Okay, you're right. Let's do this," and went and got help. But no, I had to be strong and say, "I'm gonna overcome." And I didn't. And so I pushed through. Well, then I didn't go back and really follow up on things like that with little blood pressure checks and this and that. following a year, almost identical to a year later. It was 13 months to
Wow.
almost the exact date I had the stroke. And that was a weird story. And it really left you with leaving the house on a gurney is not the way anyone wants anyone to see them. So
Oh,
yeah, well then one thing leads to another and you find out that wow, the stroke wasn't from mismanaged type 2 diabetes. It
mm,
wasn't from any other real source. So I had a really good neurologist. She came in, she goes, "Well, my physical therapist came in and said, "You're talking really good. Your strength, you tried to pull his fingers off when they give you this test, and you say it's the ubiquitous pull my finger thing at the hospital. You're on the day 3 and you're like, oh man, all these people come in and poke and prod and every 2 hours checking you. And I was kind of the rogue patient where I was just dressed in a sweatshirt and shorts. I refused to wear the gown they give you to just expose everything
yeah.
because after the first day, they basically said, "Well, we're gonna hang you you're gonna hang out here with us. We're gonna monitor you." And so I laid around and I thought, well, I can walk. I like to be active. So I was in the process of losing weight. I mean, at one point in my life, I've hit 348 pounds. And
Wow.
you just really don't, it just adds up. It creeps up on you because you're busy. You want to do all these things. You want to keep doing this, that and you let that kind of go. Well, and I was also before that a personal trainer. So, I knew the processes. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do. I just said I didn't have time. And I
Mm,
kind of let those little things go. But when you get wheeled out on a gurney, you see your family watching,
mm,
and you don't know if you're going to come back.
mm,
You don't know. You don't know if you'll ever see them again.
mm,
That said, I gotta do what I need to do to change. And so in the hospital, they laughed. And he says, "Well, you're not like all the other patients." I said, "Oh, you're right. I'm not. You don't have a gown on. Why not?" I said, "They didn't tell me I had to." I said, you have access to all my things. It's cold in here, by the way. It was and I get why they have it cold in the hospital. I spent four
mhm.
days on the fourth floor of the stroke ward. And so that is a scary thing. And
Wow.
and what I realized in that moment pardon me. What I
Yeah.
realized in that moment was I was not as bad as the others. There
Oh,
were constant calls, were code reds and this and that going on and them flying to someone's suite or someone's room. I thought, I don't have that.
mhm,
I'm really lucky. I'm laying here. I'm coherent. I can read. I can make phone calls. I've got my computer, I've got the laptop, whatever I had access to, I could watch. And it was funny because I said, I didn't really want a lot of visitors because it was really funny because one of the things that has been kind of my motto, if someone hadn't called me in 6 months, they don't get to come see me on my deathbed. It didn't matter for your Merry Christmas or
yes.
your last birthday.
Mhm,
So today's not that important. That's just there to make themselves feel good
mm,
because, wow, I didn't know this. I took this for granted. So that's too bad. Anybody else though, but I had really an outpouring of complete strangers that
mhm,
wanted to visit and help. And so that was an overwhelming feeling that there were people that didn't really know you that were your friends in the end. So they
mhm,
came through. That was a big support, but my neurologist was really fantastic. She said, "Something caused this, and we're not going to stop. We're gonna find out what's going on." She said, "Your brain's functioning right." Now, I still notice some days that I don't really say some words the way I used to, and I don't maybe think as quick as I once did, but
mhm.
maybe that's age. I don't know. I'll hit 60 this August, and
Look out.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're
you
looking
know,
incredible. You look
yeah.
amazing.
Well, thank you. It's so
Yeah,
funny because I had said one of my friends got a hold of me about something, said, "Look at us." And I thought, you got old, but I don't think I have yet. It's funny. This is why I don't go to class reunions because some of those people got old and I don't want to catch it.
I know, with
I just
the young
don't.
body, yes.
Yeah, but I think we're only as old as we feel, and that's why I really came up with kind of some new programs. I wrote a book while being debilitated, and it's called the Resilience Prescription.
Mm, mm,
It's the trifecta of heart disease, stroke, heart disease, and diabetes. And so it's really what I did was I pieced together stories, turned them into case studies. Now everybody's name's been changed, but all the times I've heard through that. So again, back to what I was saying though, the neurologist was great. She said, "I'm clearing you. You don't have to come back and see me." The only time I want to see you is maybe at a farmer's market doing what you're doing.
Mm.
Keep going. Then, so they sent me to the heart doctor and they put a heart loop monitor into me. They did a calcium score. So I would recommend for anybody, men or women, do the calcium score. Some places charge $49, some $149. It
Mm.
was the best $149 ever spent because what that did is it's an old fashioned thing. The heart doctor even told me, he says it's the oldest technology in the world, a CT scan. Sadly, insurance won't pay for it to cover it, but it's the only way to truly detect what the vessels of the heart are seeing.
Wow.
So it's something that can really save someone's life. And I have found places that will do calcium scores for $49. What they found was I had a 90% heart blockage. I was that close to having a massive heart attack, that
Wow.
close. And if it hadn't been for her pushing to say, we got to dig deeper, we got to evolve further, then I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't
Wow.
be with you. And I wasn't just that bad. Here's my doctor's take. He goes, "Lou, we went in and they put a heart loop monitor in me. So now I'm monitored. I have this little thing." And I laughed because I said, it's funny. Here's the thing. I says, "Great. The kids will say, Dad's a hotspot now. We can get Wi-Fi in the car anywhere we're at." Because the lady
Word.
looks at me, she goes, "That is not true. I don't think that's possible." And I said, "Ma'am, I think anything is possible. This heart rate monitor is really cool. I have a cell phone that I travel with. And what I do is that but every night between 12 p.m. and 5 or 12 a.m. and 5 a.m., it records my daily activities and uploads it. They can
Mm.
monitor what I have been doing. So,
Yes.
for instance, managing a couple of restaurants last year before the foot incident, I was very busy. Let's just say we had a wedding of about 300 people, had another dinner event of about 150 people, and then we had a charitable event going on that had almost 800 people. So we were just busy. I mean, from 5 p.m. that evening until almost 10 p.m., I ran a heart rate of about 135 to 140 because we've probably seen over 1,000 people through the bar area and whatnot. I get a call on Monday morning, "Lou, your heart rate, were you working out this weekend?" "Oh, I was exhausted this weekend." "Yes." "What were you doing?" "I was basically bartending." And she says, "Your heart rate ran between 135 and 145 for 4.5 hours steady." I said, "Oh, that sounds about right." It was like running a marathon. I said, "Ma'am, I had 14,000 steps and I never left the confine of a XYZ amount of square space, 220 square feet of a restaurant area. I
Mm.
never left that. I didn't leave." But she goes, "That's how many steps you?" I say, "We were busy. We were really hoofing it." And so that was the really the
A big
one of
eye
the
opener.
neat an eye opener for me, and it was saying a lot about the exercise piece. But then when I went in and had to have some stents, they gave me the calcium score, so we're gonna have to do some stents. We may have to do 2. And I said, "Okay, that's whatever you think you need to do, doc. This is your profession, you do it." Next thing you know, I go in. It's a really cool procedure. They
Mm.
kinda sedate you, but you can actually watch on TV, which
Mm.
I'm very squeamish, and I said, "I can't watch." Then all of a sudden I thought, "Well, you may never be here again, so you probably ought to look because 'cause you'll never get an inside view of your heart." So I'm kind of watching this, 40-inch big screen TV above the operating table, kind of loopy and really, really not in your right mindset going, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of fun. Oh, well, look at that. That doesn't look good." And so they went in and they put these little stents in, and next thing you know, they open up. So I kind of go back and I'm nappy and droopy in the room. Doc comes in, sees me, and he says, "I just want to say you weren't just bad, you're really
Mm.
bad." He goes, "You were 90%." And he goes, "I need to do the other 2 arteries. I need to bring you back." And I said, "Well," he goes, "Only if you want to, though." And I said, "Well, I'm already breathing better." So now this was a really strange story in the whole thing. For, I don't know, 2022, I got COVID after going to a 5-day intensive. And I had assumed because my breathing difficulties was due to the COVID and
Mm.
or long COVID symptoms, because now we're in 2024,
Yes.
2020, and I'm having a hard time breathing. My little boy and I would go swim all the time to exercise. We were losing weight, working hard, and
Mhm.
I could never swim more than about 20 yards, and I had to stop and take a breath and be fatigued.
Wow.
I kept thinking, and everybody kept saying, "Well, it's just this. You're still having the long COVID symptoms. You'll come out of it. This is peace." No, it was my heart block. I had no ability, and so I tell the doc, "Yes, let's get right back on. Let's do it. Let's." I said, "I'll do it. How long is it going to take me to get scheduled? What do I need to do? What are the procedures?" Now, this was the real compassion of a doctor that you don't normally see, and I really credit Dr. Maksud for this. He looks at
Mm,
me and goes, "I've just looked at your history. You're losing weight. You're trying hard. You're doing all the things you need to do. I don't normally see this." He pulls out his cell phone. He says, "I'm texting my girl, and I'll have you back here in 2 weeks as soon
wow.
as this room is available." And that was it. And now the beauty, I apologize. Not only am I a little tearful reliving it, but the allergies today have hit me. But one of the things that really caught me was his awareness of watching my medical history through my general practitioner, making notes of your diabetes is under control, you're eating right, you're working right, you're doing all the things you need to do. I will get you to the front of the list. I will make that a priority.
Wow.
Now, here is where we really had a divine intervention into this piece was that uh, we went in again, same scenario. I'm laying on the thing. I got used to it now. I'm like, oh yeah, just give me some drugs to relax me and I'll be okay. And then I watched the whole thing this time.
Mm,
And to see the heart beating and to see how that guides right up through your arm, through the artery. They put the first stent in, and he says, "Lou, this was a miracle because I put the first stent in. I took 3 stents the first time. The second time he put in the 3rd artery, he put the stent in." He says, "You were really lucky. You as soon as I put that in, your other artery was still flexible enough, it opened right up. With
wow.
the right blood flow, everything else started working naturally." And so there you are. I didn't have to do the second one. So now I have 4. And, but that was the life-giving piece of that. So in that journey, we get to the crushed foot.
Well, in
There's
their
been ye
journey, you're homeschooled, correct?
Right, yeah, so I'm still homeschooling. Yeah, now he's
Oh
13 and it's even more difficult. So that whole time I'm trying
gosh.
to help keep him occupied, and
Yes.
that was the hard part was, now how do we do this? But he's been resilient too. So it's
Mhm,
not just me that goes through this, it's everybody else. It's an impact on the family and it's tough,
mhm,
it's difficult,
mhm.
and that's the hardest piece for me to swallow is holy
Yes.
smokes, I've impacted the rest of them.
Mm,
They deserve kudos for
mhm.
putting up with this and being able to handle that. Yeah, yeah. There's
Yes.
just a lot of trauma that kinda goes
Mhm,
with everybody there. So we still have to navigate that and keep that
mhm,
mindset going. Unfortunately, I have some curriculums and other things I can use that keep him occupied with that, but
mhm,
it's very tough.
mhm.
Yeah, and hard. Yeah. So I broke my foot helping a
Oh,
neighbor, stepped on a hose under some brush trying to help. I was
mm,
walking every day, I was walking daily, 3.5 miles a day, going to the gym, swimming, super active, got the blood under control, or glucose under control, heart under control. Then hit this, and I went to the doc. They said, "Oh, it's just some swelling. You just twisted your ankle." Well, as it turned out, the talus and that holds the whole foot together in the center of your foot had
gosh.
completely shattered, and
Oh,
I had not only did I have that, but the bone spurs, arthritis then developed, and so that was swollen, and then I had to wait a few months, and then, of course, that was kind of misdiagnosed and sent home as a sprain, no X-rays. Then when we got the X-rays, went to the GP, and he says to me, "I gotta get you to an orthopedic surgeon because this is out of my league." I
mhm.
don't He goes, "I don't even know where to begin with what you got going on there." Go to the foot doctor, the foot specialist, and he says, "How'd you walk in here?" I said, "Well, 2 feet like everybody else." He goes, "No, most people would be wheeled in here. I don't know. Your heel is broken, your ligaments are destroyed, and your talus is missing." So it's like I was walking around on a, giant squeeze ball,
Oh
basically.
my gosh.
Yeah. So then we had to wait a few months for medical clearances and all the pieces to do that. And
Mm.
then we got to the actual foot surgery, and that was my birthday. I had that on my birthday last year. That's how I celebrated my 59th birthday,
Oh,
was in a 5.5 hour surgery on my foot to reconstruct it. Yeah, so that's how we got here. And it was during that rehab time that I wrote the book, Resilience Prescription. which
Mm,
we'll put on Amazon. And for your viewers, just for you guys, I will, when you're ready to post this, I will make it free for X amount of days. They can download that free of charge and
yeah.
get the Kindle version. And yeah, so that is available on purchase. And it's just one of those little things. It was just recalled all of the pieces. I went through cardiac rehab after 12 weeks, really got down to my lowest weight. And I've been in many years at, I think I hit 235 or 225, and I
Mm,
probably hadn't been there since my freshman year of college. And
oh,
so, but I was really happy that for age 59, I was actually wearing pants the size I was in high school
that's good.
40 some years ago, you know? So I only gained about 7 pounds during the time in the chair. But now, it's getting harder because things weren't healing right, and I went back, and the doc says, I said, "I got some more pain, I got some other stuff, and I got this popping sound." And now we
Mm,
found that the ankle has become dislodged from the foot. So there's what was a horizontal out of alignment before is now a vertical out of alignment. So it's just one thing after another, but we're really trying to get that pieced up. And so now I got to figure out what's the next step. But
mhm,
yeah, in all of that, losing the identity, back to what you were talking about, when you
mhm,
think about your identity, it's still who you are. I've changed professions. I've gone from one extreme to another,
mhm,
and we still have to fight that. But it was never being caught up in, as a photographer. And I see this in many of my photographer friends or videographer friends. That's all they know and that's all they do. And they get caught up in the who they are through what they do. And we
mm,
just can't do that
mhm,
because I haven't done it. Now, guess what? I'm going back into it. I'm producing videos for people, shooting video content, and creating these other pieces along with doing a lot of the neuroscience pieces of what we do for coaching and helping others get through those struggles and those
mhm.
pieces of what they do. So, yeah,
Incredible.
but it was who you are. You are the individual you were created to be, and you live through that. And so I can't live vicariously through what the others do. I can't make others do what I wanted to do. I do find joy in that, creating the photos and the videos, and I love the challenge of lighting, and I love the challenge of creating that piece. But, it was just a profession at the time. It
Mhm.
was a business. I couldn't get caught up in that.
Yes.
I learned that from a entrepreneur many years ago, a
Mm.
successful business selling furniture. And one day he says, "I'm no longer gonna produce these baker's racks. I bought a pump company." And I said, "Oh, that's a twist." He goes,
Yeah,
"Yeah."
yeah.
He goes, "I'm only in business to make a living and provide for my family. It
Mm,
doesn't make me who I am. I like creating. I like doing this." And that's, where we find ourselves. And so that made it easier for me really to get through even this piece of the resilience that we have to do is that we are individuals. So I was the dad. I was the husband. That's who I am and how
mm.
we kind of move forward. And we're creating better people through the example we set.
Talking about resilience and the way that it really shaped you in who you are today. And you were talking about time and
Yeah.
how valuable time is. And you brought up some really good key points. Very, very good. Being in the hospital and
Yeah.
looking at your heart and just the visualization of
Mhm.
time. It's a big reminder of
Yeah.
the time that we have, and we're
Yeah.
created for resilience. And a lot of times we go on those journeys, and it's
Right.
journeys to be able to teach as
Yeah.
the as the leader that you are.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and that was the funny thing. Everybody says, "Oh, you've probably binge watched movies in the hospital." I said, "No, I really didn't." Everybody, the nurses said, "It's amazing you don't have the TV on like everybody else." I said, "No, I had a couple books. I had books brought in a journal and
Okay.
my iPad. I didn't even bring my laptop. I was like, no, just leave that there. I had my iPad for writing and I just did a lot of writing and soul reflecting. And so on my blog at leweverling.com is some blog pieces of that past
Let's
and
wrap.
what I did, what revelations I had while reflecting and just looking at that life piece. And then, like I said, realizing that, there were people in rooms next to me that had nobody visiting them, had nobody caring about,
Wow.
they were there, they were alone. Now, I did I did forcefully say alone because there were a lot of people that wanted to come. That I said, no, they don't get to. It's just time for my family. And that's all. That's
Mhm.
all that's going to be here, you know. And with our work with the immigrant community that we do with the nonprofit, the World Grace Project, there were a lot of our folks there that did wanna come, and they did show up, and they showed up in droves, and some I had never really I mean, I had seen, I had talked to briefly, not in the elements that I did the work with that, but in other pieces that were really concerned, and more concerned than the ones that actually called themselves my friends, you
Wow.
know? I mean, these were folks that I might have had one interaction with, but we had helped them move forward in some piece of their life and they were concerned. And so that really said a lot to me, meant a lot in that. But it
Mhm.
was a time for reflecting. And I did. I had 4.5 days in the hospital there. Chronically, when I got out, my neighbor went in to the same room I was in.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. When he called me and said, "Hey, are you able to drive yet? I need something. I'm in the hospital. They finally admitted me." And I said, "Okay, yeah. What room are you in?" "I'm in room 410." "Wait a minute. I just left 410 at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So now at 7 o'clock, you're in there." So that was how crowded the hospital was. They needed the space, and I realized how lucky I was because there were some people that weren't able to walk out. They had to be rolled out. They didn't have the faculties about them to even function after that time on the stroke floor. Yeah. So
Oh.
that leads to your gratitude piece,
Mm.
of like, well, this was bad. Yeah.
I love that you brought up, the TV and being in the hospital and
Yeah.
asking, "Why don't you have any TV on?" It's learning and it's
Yeah.
inner work that
Yeah.
you did during that journey is
Yeah.
a lot of the journaling, the gratitude, the
Yeah, just those reflective pieces were so helpful. I mean, occasionally turn the TV on to watch this or that. I'm like, oh yeah, I can finally watch something that the kids don't want to watch. Like, I can get, and then you watch something and you're like, the nature TV is just awful. I'm just done. This is bad. I don't care. I can't watch this. And then sometimes you inadvertently listen to somebody else's show because the TV was so loud in the neighboring room. You had no choice but to hear whatever show they were watching. So you had
very
that piece,
yeah.
but you also heard the family dysfunctions and dynamics and arguments in the hallways, and you're like, "Oh gosh, I'm so glad I don't have that." Somebody being yelled at because they're in the hospital. I thought, "Man, this is not the time to be accusing somebody of what you're hurting somebody else because you're in the hospital on your deathbed. They're trying to heal, let them have their space for Pete's sake." So yeah,
Mhm,
there's a lot of gratitude. If you're just listening, sitting and listening to the things around you in the environment
mhm,
sometimes to me are the best thing. And I think that's the human nature of life is sometimes just best to go to a park and just observe and watch and just listen. Somebody will say, "What are you doing?" Just listening. I just like
oh,
to
so
listen.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just need that to unplug, and that's part of what's led me to another piece that I'll help you I'll share with you and your viewers too, is the integrated mind, and that's gonna be on the website too, and that's part of my interpersonal neurobiology journey, the studies of that theology and the mixes, the mindset, and how you do that reflection time, and you have that body, mind, and spirit coming together, and
Right.
how we bring that into one as an integrated soul. And we have to have all levels of things. They can't, it's kind of like trying to drive on a tire that is only round on 3/4 of the
Mm,
wheel, not all the wheel. And so we need to really reflect on that, how we can bring these little pieces in. And it can be 2 minutes at a time or 10 minutes at a time, anytime is better than no time,
mhm.
and how we can bring that life together in that. And so that'll be up too, and I'll have a free download for you. And I was
Yes,
was working on that today.
in the show
Yeah,
notes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have that. I was trying to get it all uploaded, and I had a something happen, and I was like, "Oh, that didn't quite go the way I thought it was going to today."
I
So
love
anyway, we'll
it.
have that ready for when you broadcast, so that way we can put that together for you. But it's really a like a
Okay.
20-page piece that's someone can do over 12 weeks and just take that to mind and help to look at these reflection times. So yeah. Yeah.
A special gift. It's the flow, the listening, the trusting, and
Mhm.
powerful reflection on that, the mind, body, spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
all into one.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's just been that was the integral piece of that, to stop and reflect and think about that. And when we and I noticed that too when we get out of balance, just like that being confined. So in my original surgery, I was had to be elevated and I made my life was in a recliner for 71 days before I could get to the doctor to wear a boot. Everything I did was on one leg. So,
Well,
I
it for all the viewers, I don't know, really talking about the journey too with the
Mhm.
identity, and then for how long was it with the one side
Yeah.
of your body not
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
functioning?
Yeah, so for that, I worked and managed that restaurant on this broken foot and I worked in our nonprofit. I've worked at probably for several years. That foot was broken.
Mm,
And then it wasn't until I tore the ligaments that I noticed the rest of the things, the little incident helping the neighbor. So
yeah.
I just pushed through because that was my comment to the guy that the doctor called me Rambo because he goes, his resident assistant or his graduate student there goes, nobody walks on that. And I
Mm,
laughed. I said, well, I did. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I'm looking at your tattoos because, I have two arms full of tattoos. And it's like he goes, "Obviously, pain is not you're just is not an enemy to you." I was like, "Well, when you have stuff to do, you get it done. You just keep moving forward." And that's how we have to look at these battles too, is we have to keep moving forward. We can't change it. We can't fix it. We're in the middle of it. We have to keep moving forward. But now I'm a little more attuned to my body and listening to that because just like my doc says, "I'm so glad you came back about this ankle because I told you I know how you operate, and I know that you will push through." And I said, "Honestly, now the ankle hurts worse than the foot did." But I
wow.
did manage those restaurants, and I managed that in a senior living facility here in Cedar Falls. And then finally, I had to go on a roller, had to go on a scooter, and it was scoot around the restaurants and scoot back and forth through things. And then I would walk, but that helped me get off that foot a little bit until it was time for the surgery. So
Mm,
yeah, you do though. You really just have this mindset. But I'll tell you, the hardest part was laying in that chair. I bought a special recliner, so it was a recliner more meant for when I weighed 348 pounds. And it was a little taller too. So being 6'1", some recliners just don't fit you well. But that was where I had to sleep.
mm,
That's where I had to stay almost all day long, except for absolute necessities. I would use a walker to get up, for showering in the shower stool. Couldn't get that foot wet for X amount of day. I mean, I couldn't get it into the shower until day 70. I forget how it was 30 days, 34 days before I could actually get that foot wet because you
wow.
had to allow for the healing.
Mhm.
But so I had a special shower stool, and then I would I would roller walk, and then, of course, I have 12 steps to get into the house from the traveling, so getting out and about was never fun either, so it was a one-legged hop down the stairs, and then, a one-legged hop across a little walkway, and then 4 more steps down, and then coming back up. So I was glad I really was in better shape that point in time
Mm,
because it was quite the cardiovascular effort to hop up and down your steps on one foot and then being cautious not to land, or fall in that mix of that too. And so that was it. 71, 72 or 72 days. I was reclined with my foot elevated and and sleep there and write there and work there, eat there. That
reflect
yeah.
and,
Yeah, and reflect. Yeah, yeah. So and do some remote work for
oh,
people. So, yeah.
mm,
Even Zoom calls, we're sitting there trying to at an angle. Here I
yeah,
am. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
well,
Sorry about the looking up my nose, but this is where I have to be right now. Yes.
oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
definitely talk about legend. The journey that you've been on, pure legend,
Well, thank you. Yeah.
resilient.
And we'll get to do this again in about 7 weeks, I suppose. I don't know. We're working on I'm trying to advance the time. I thought I could try to do the summer without the surgery, but
Talked about that before we got on the show, yes,
yeah.
so just had a major
Yeah, yeah, the ankle has become detached from my foot. So my ankle is basically broken and it's wobbling inside its fixture. And so that I think one thing got stronger, so that put pressure on another piece, and then that's caused degeneration. And part of my heart problems caused a lack of blood flow down through my legs to especially to my feet. So
Wow.
then that added to bone density problems, and that has worn, and now the arthritis. So I'm basically bone on bone when I'm walking. I could brace it and do some things. I That's what I'm doing right now for a short term. That gets me around, lets me drive and have a little freedom. You know, ironically, when I was first able cleared to drive after the foot surgery, the doc says, "You can drive now." And I said, "You know, there's 14 inches of snow." It was right after the big snowstorm. I didn't
Yeah.
even know if we were going to make it to that appointment to get the approval to do it because it was so snowy and so slick. And he says, "You can drive now." And I said, "Doc, I haven't driven for 5 months. I don't think on ice and snow is a very good time to start driving for a guy who hasn't moved his foot in a long time." And he
Yeah.
just smiled. So I did, I was felt like I was back to 15 again. I went to a big parking lot that was abandoned at the school and learned to redrive and park and how I could stop and, like, okay, we're gonna relearn. I'm gonna take it slow. So yeah, that's another piece of that. But yeah, this one is hurting. And if I wait, the consequences of waiting this time, he said you could wait up to 6 years.
Mhm.
If I do that though, I could lose so much bone that one leg would be 1 inch shorter than the other. And I can't imagine what that would do to my hip, other
Mhm.
pieces and other joints in my body. And
Mhm.
so that's just one piece that I don't wanna wait. It's not worth it because of the long-term consequences. Yes, is it gonna affect us all again for the summer? Absolutely. Is
Mhm.
it better for the long term? Yes, because now, as I said, I wanna hit 60 at a point where I feel like I'm energetic, but it doesn't have to be. I read an article the other day. It said, was it everything is about 20 years younger these days than it used to be. Someone says, "Wow, I'm 40, so it means I'm basically 20 again." And I'm 50, I'm reliving my 30s. Well, that's the same way we can be for 60. I wanted to hit 60 better than I was at 40. So for my 40th birthday, I celebrated by doing a triathlon. I had gone through another health crisis back then at the age of 37. I was overweight, lost all the weight, got down to about 215, 220, and was in the primest shape of my life. So rather than going out celebrating like most would do on their 40th, big parties and drinking, I
Mhm.
did a triathlon, which allowed me to eat 3 pizzas and 7 hamburgers, that day. I've never been so hungry in all my life.
I bet.
But that fell away again, and it was because I became focused on too many other things and making sure everybody else was taken care of, and I didn't take care of myself, and you
Mm.
get kinda lost in that identity of that. So it's easy to lose identity, but as long as I keep moving forward or we keep moving forward in those ways, we can just really advance so many ways differently, and that's kinda where we wanna do that. I said, "Well, I might be laid up a little bit, but by the same token, I can move forward." And I am celebrating by doing the Senior Olympics this year. So I'm going to be over in Des Moines to do the basketball
Okay.
portion of that.
Mine
I've got clearance to do
yeah,
that.
there we go. You'll have to let
Yeah,
me know when that is. That's
I
amazing.
will. Yeah, yeah.
Talking about the giver, it's almost
Mhm.
like the giving and the receiving. So, do
Yep.
you feel like you had a hard time with receiving?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah, because,
what
you're
when I first met you, there was just something, and it's funny because you were when you first went to the hospital, you were talking
uh
about how everybody wanted to come and see you, and you're like, "No, I'm
Yeah,
just gonna have family." I would have
yeah.
been there. There was just
I know you would.
wow, there was something
Yeah,
about the just your energy and your
thank
presence
you.
that,
Yeah,
people just magnetize to, and
yeah, yeah.
but
That's
yeah.
very kind. You're right, though. It's very hard to receive. And it's like all those times I'm laying there having to tell somebody, "Can you go get this for me? Oh, I need you to make me a protein shake. Can you, and then you just don't want to do it." I even said that in the hospital. So this is funny that you said that because
Mhm.
one of the comments I said was one of the nurses came in. I had to push the button. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I got it."
Shoot.
And she comes in and I said, "Oh, I really hate to bother you because you guys are so busy on this floor." And it's like, she goes,
Mhm.
"No, I won't forget her look." She just went like this. "No, it's okay. We
Yes.
like coming to your room
Mhm.
because we know you're not filing a complaint. We just come down here to get a little energy. You always give us a tidbit that makes us do the rest of our day a little stronger. So if you would push the button more often so we have an excuse to come in here because
Yeah.
most of the time we can't get away. And it
Mhm,
just made me laugh, and I never really thought about that till you said something about
mhm,
that then. And even my cousin one time said, you have a presence that just steals a room when you walk in,
mm.
that people want to gravitate to that. And I think that's just something I probably learned from my grandfather or inherited inherently. And that can be a great piece. And it can also be that real detractor from life because as we've tried to explain to our kids, sometimes you will attract the people that won't necessarily have your best interest in mind. And that's when you have to start setting boundaries and you have to remember, like that. You would have been so welcome to come to that
Yeah.
place.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Whereas I know there are others, I'm just like, "Oh, no, it would just be too much of an energy vampire." And they just can just and they you but you have to and it's hard. It's hard to cut people out in some of those circumstances where you just know that they're just there because they want one more tidbit of information. They're
Yeah.
afraid they didn't ask you the right question. But I
Yes.
said, this is why you have to establish those boundaries, and not every one of your friends is always going to have that best interest in you. And the others you just love to share with and give information to, just like yourself and
Mhm.
or the nurses that came in. They were just so pleasant. How could somebody just treat them like garbage? Because I heard it from the other rooms. And that's when I started paying more attention to that. When I'd hear somebody yelling at them, like, okay, I'm gonna buzz them and get them in to give them hey, don't let that get to you because here's why you're here. This is what it is. Don't let that take you away. And that's hard for me even nowadays as I'm like kind of feeling defeated this last week. Like, ooh, one more thing. Here we go. And that's
Mm.
why we did the podcast, just one more thing. So it's gotten delayed yet again because I had to cancel because of a couple with my host or my guest
Yeah.
because I had to be at the hospital for CTs. So now I'm working on that, but we'll get that going. So yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, I'm so glad we did not have to reschedule this episode.
yeah, yeah. Me too. Yeah, no, I did. I was
I'm
like, no,
so
we went.
glad. Yeah, so happy you brought that up or that was brought into this show because when you are such a giver, a lot of times you allow everybody into your circle
Yeah,
because heart is so big and you want to
yeah,
help and you want all the things. But just like you said, the energy vampires and kind of rewarding and it's just energy. Yeah, energy vampires is a
yeah.
great word.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard that years ago, but I thought, man, that's just it, and we can go through that in so many ways. And I mean
Mhm.
it and sometimes it's family members,
Yeah,
sometimes it's one's very old blood that
yeah.
does that to them. And you just are like, and sometimes you find that some people that you've never known but come to become friends with are more like the family
Mm,
that you love because they're not there to detract. And,
mm,
I even shared that with some of our restaurant staff before that a lot of times with what they do, especially in the senior living facilities,
mhm.
these servers, I had a young lady said, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm just a server. And I said, hey, where you're at right here, you're someone's granddaughter, you're someone's daughter, and you make their day. They can't have family near them. You
Yeah.
are their family because you are representing a facility that's not only open to the public, but open to the residents as well. And I said, so you're not just a server, you are their lifeblood. You're giving them, and I learned that from when my little boy was 3. One
Yeah.
day I thought I was maybe he wasn't even 3. We were at the YMCA. I was a personal trainer at the YMCA, and they had a little group of ladies and a couple little men that sat in the corner. I called them the coffee clutch. And I would go work out during the childcare hours, and it was
Mhm.
limited. You had 2 hours and we were leaving. And, we had this routine. It was like 9 to 11 that was open. So I go get my workout in and
Mhm.
it would close at 11. So 10 till 11, I'd get him and we'd go and be like, oh, we got to get home, get your lunch. And one day he says to me, no, dad, I just want to sit down with these folks. I was like,
Mm.
oh, come on. And I was like, no, 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 we got to go. And he says, no, let's just sit down. Okay. So we sat with the folks, the coffee clutch. And the next day, I had 3 of the little gals thank me, and one said, "My grandkids are 12 hours away. I never see them. I
Mm.
needed that." Another gal. I don't ever see my grandkids. They don't call.
Mm.
Thank you for letting him sit with us. Thank you both for setting time here. I don't see my kids. That was a big learning lesson about 2015. Yeah, he would have been 2. I learned that from a child. I learned that because of the innocence of a child. We need to sit here. He knew their hearts and what they were feeling. And the one lady just, and after that, they spoiled him with Superman capes and all kinds of stuff because he would never not wear a Batman,
Oh,
Spider-Man,
I love it.
Superman cape. He would go everywhere. Everywhere we went, he was in a superhero outfit. And
Oh,
I'll never forget that. I just,
that brings
but they,
back
they
that brings
fed
back
his ego.
yeah, I was gonna say, have you ever read the book Alter Ego?
Oh no, I haven't. I haven't. I'll have
Okay,
to
that
read it.
is such a great book because he really talks about, we have 2 different egos, especially if
Yeah.
you're a speaker, you have a show and all the things.
Yeah.
You put on your Superman cape when you're speaking, that's
Yeah.
your ego. Anyways, it just brought
That's so
that
funny.
was
Well,
so awesome that you brought that
yeah.
up because he was, like,
Yeah.
in his
He
Superman
did for
ego.
3 years. I mean, I bought more Halloween costumes of superheroes after Halloween when they were on discount just to keep his closet fueled, and we were going in the Hy-Vee here in town one day, and these 2 little girls just swooned over him because they're like, "Mom, it's Batman." And
Oh,
his chest popped up, and he took this, and he
he's
just
yep.
smiled, and he was probably 4 at the time. He's
Mhm.
always taller than everybody. He's 5'9" now. So he's
Oh
13 and
my
he's 5'9", Jordan.
gosh.
He's
My
just,
gosh, I
yeah,
can't even
the
imagine.
gentle giant. I said something about little man, and this lady, I was like, "Oh yeah, I can't say that anymore. Yeah, I'm just so in the habit of saying little
Yeah.
man." But he's still, that child at heart. And it was just funny though. That we walked in, so everybody when he was 3 thought he was 6 or 7, but these 2 girls were probably about 5 and 3, and they were, "Mom, it's Batman."
Oh,
His little chest popped up and he just smiled and he played the role. He played that alter ego you spoke of. And so that's true. And,
yeah,
there is
kind of.
so much truth to that. I can't wait to check that book out
Oh,
because
it's such a
yeah,
good book. I
I
went
bet.
on and it's so good, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Well, I would
Yeah.
love to ask you, there one thing that you would love to leave the audience with?
Your body carries a unique history, which means we must train and live with the reality and not some fantasy of the idea of perfect health.
Mm,
And I wanna help people reconnect with that history, move with confidence,
mm,
and build resilience through small, repeatable actions.
mm,
That's just the thing we have to remember. I talk to guys now that say, "Lou, you look amazing. What are you doing?" Well, what I'm eating right. I'm not just eating whatever's garbage for the day.
mhm.
And they'll say, "Well, I wanna get back to the gym," and I love this, Jordan. It's so funny. All the men I talk to will say, "I remember back when I could bench 3 and a quarter," and it's always the same number,
Yeah,
bench 3 and a quarter. And I say, "I don't know if they ever did or not." It
yeah.
doesn't matter to me, but
There
it's like a good round number that they
Mhm.
say. And I said, "Well, it's not what we could do when we were 20. It's what we can do with where we're going." And
Mm,
so when I go to the gym, yes, there were times I bench pressed 300 pounds. I hit it and I was like, okay, what did that do for me? I'm not a Mr. Olympian. I
mm,
have no need to train for that. I actually talked to somebody who was in that before, and they go, "Why do you think your foot was the way it was? Why do you think you have the problems?" Not only did I have the foot problem, I had to have a meniscus removed from my left knee as well,
oh
just
my
weeks
god.
into the rehab. So that's another piece of that story I forgot.
Mhm.
But I said, probably the reason my foot hurts is because I've squatted 675 pounds before. I could toe raise 1,000 pounds. What good did it do me?
Mhm.
Nothing. It's made it so it really derailed my life as I approached this next stage. What would matter to me now is balance and health so that it's not an issue. And that's why I say that about the move with confidence. It
Mm,
doesn't matter what let's reconnect with that history. It was great when we had it, but we need to move to a point where what can we do in the future? What do we look for as we get to this next stage of our life? And that
mm,
would be the piece that we need to leave them with is where we're going. And that's what matters now. Doesn't matter. Don't let tomorrow stop you from what you did yesterday, good or bad. So we have to keep with that.
Gosh, what an incredible reminder and just a powerful sharing of all the things. Truly so honored to have you
Oh,
on the
thank
show
you.
today, sharing, and you will definitely be back. We're gonna have you back.
All right, yeah, sounds good. Anytime. Well, it's a pleasure, and I want to have you on for just one more thing because I know you have pieces to talk about that too. Just when you think you've hit a stride, there's just one more thing, and that's just how life is going to work, and we
Mm,
have to roll with that because we can't plan for that. We cannot ever plan for that. It's going to
mm.
happen. Yeah,
It's gonna
yeah,
be incredible.
yeah,
Well, thank you again so much.
yeah.
And for everybody listening, we will drop all of the details and links in the show notes. And again, thank you again. I know this episode, you could really feel this episode, all of the emotions and the resilience and the power, the legacy, the icon that you are. So thank you again. And
Oh,
until
thank you, George.
time, so much love.